I should warn you before anything else. Out of the 50 stories I've collected over the years, 50 nights burned into my memory like scars, there is one I was never supposed to speak aloud. I've tried to forget it, tried to bury it under all the other hauntings, but it keeps rising, pressing itself against my voice like it wants to come through me instead of from me. Demons, ghosts, and things with no names have followed me for so long that I've stopped pretending it's coincidence. Some drift in like cold air, others cling to me like shadows that learned how to breathe. But this one didn't just follow me, it changed me. It listens when I speak. Even now, I shouldn't be recording this. Honestly, this video is a mistake. I made a promise, no, more like an oath, that I would never repeat what happened that night. Some stories aren't meant to be told, and some things don't like being remembered. If you're listening to this, I need you to do one thing for me. If anything whispers back while you're alone, behind you, below you, or from the dark corner you haven't looked at yet, don't answer. Not like I did. Not even to say you're afraid. Especially not then. I keep glancing at the door. Something's been pacing just outside it since I hit record. It's slow, like it's waiting for the exact moment I go too far. If this video cuts suddenly, you'll know why. I shouldn't tell this story, but you're here now, and it's already listening. So, fine, I'll begin. But remember, you chose to hear this. And once you hear the first part, you'll understand why every second after it feels like trespassing. And if the room around you feels heavier, or the air seems to shift toward your ears, don't pause the video. Pausing never ever saved anyone. It only made the listening closer. People think I started collecting demon and ghost encounters because I was obsessed with the paranormal. But the truth is far less glamorous. I started because something happened to me first. Something I couldn't explain. Something no one would believe. And I needed to know if anyone else had felt that same impossible cold pressing against their life. I wasn't looking for stories. I was searching for patterns, clues, survival instructions, and eventually they started finding me instead. It began small. I joined paranormal forums, not as a storyteller, but as someone hoping for confirmation that I wasn't unraveling. I combed through police logs for unexplained deaths, missing persons cases that ended too abruptly, or reports that officers wrote up with trembling hands. I talked to priests who didn't want their names mentioned, to hospice workers who swore they saw shapes gathering around certain beds minutes before the monitors flatlined. Late-night Reddit lurkers began sending me messages, claiming they had something I needed to hear, like they recognized whatever mark I carried. The more I learned, the worse it got. Every story came with a rule or a warning. Never answer a whisper before dawn. Never look directly at a reflection that smiles on its own. Never speak your full name in a place that feels abandoned but isn't quiet enough. These weren't superstitions. They were survival maps left behind by people who didn't always make it. And yet, the most unsettling thing wasn't the tales themselves. It was how they connected, how each separate encounter felt like part of a larger hidden ecosystem. Something feeds, something hunts, something moves in patterns most people never notice until they're already marked. The ghosts weren't random. The demons weren't isolated. The nameless things lurking at the edges of houses, forests, hospitals, they behaved like predators sharing territory. Over time, I began cataloging the encounters like case files. Some were detailed, others frantic, half sentences typed at 3 a.m. before the sender's account vanished. Two stories were completely erased from the internet before I could archive them, scrubbed clean, like something didn't want them remembered. But I still have fragments, and those pieces show up later in this list. Trust me, you'll know exactly which ones they are. I didn't choose to become the keeper of these cases. It happened because once you start noticing the cracks between our world and whatever breathes behind it, you can't look away. You can listen, collect, and hope the story isn't meant for you. Story 1. The scratching at the door. It started with gentle taps, the kind a small dog makes when it wants to come inside. The woman who wrote to me said it even whined the way her old beagle did. Same pitch, same rhythm. But her dog had been dead for 6 years. She tried ignoring it until the scratching grew impatient, sharper, almost human, in the way it dragged downward. When she finally looked through the peephole, something stood on 2 legs, but its head hung low, sniffing. Story 2. The attic that laughed. A teenager emailed me an audio clip from his attic after weeks of hearing someone crying above his room. The recording didn't capture any crying. Instead, it played back a thin, raspy laughter that rose and fell like someone trying to mimic the sound of weeping. He swore the laughter wasn't audible in real time, only on playback. The last 10 seconds were the worst. A whisper saying his name twice, then a third time in a voice that sounded like his own. Story 3. The Mirror Walker. A woman told me she kept seeing someone move exactly when she did, only not in mirrors. Reflections behaved normally, but her peripheral vision showed another her, pacing behind her in hallways, following too closely in grocery store aisles. She only saw its full face once. Same features, but smiling so widely, the skin around its mouth cracked open. After that, she stopped going out at night because she claimed the other version lingered behind her car window, fogging it with its breath. Story 4. The name the child shouldn't know. A 4-year-old boy woke his parents by whispering a name over and over. They thought he was dreaming until he pointed to the far corner of his room and said, "He said you forgot him." The name he spoke belonged to the mother's brother, who had died before she was born. Something even she didn't know until her parents confirmed it. That night, the boy cried himself to sleep, insisting the man in the corner kept tapping the wall, asking to be let in. Story 5. The hospital room. A priest assigned to last rites at a local hospital refused to enter one particular room. He claimed something was already waiting beside the dying patient. Something that didn't want him there. When staff begged him to go inside anyway, he stood frozen at the doorway, clutching his crucifix so tightly it snapped. The patient died minutes later, eyes wide open, staring at the corner where the priest swore he saw a figure crouched low, grinning with rows of needle-like teeth. Story 6. The house that didn't want guests. A young couple rented a cabin for a weekend getaway. Every time they tried to sleep, the temperature plummeted and footsteps circled their bed. They left early, but when the owner checked the cabin afterward, he found fingerprints on the ceiling, long dragging trails, like someone had been crawling upside down. Above them, he never rented the property again. He also never told the couple that the last guests left in the middle of the night, screaming about something watching them from the rafters. Story 7. The wrong voice on the phone. A man grieving his sister's death received a call from her number weeks after the funeral. The voice sounded like hers at first. Soft, tired, apologizing for missing him. But halfway through, it shifted tone, growing distorted and impatient. It asked if he remembered the promise, though he swore they'd never made any such agreement. When he finally asked who he was speaking to, the voice sighed like it was disappointed and said, "Not her, but she hears you." Then the call cut. Story 8. The visitor in the storage unit. A security guard reviewing footage from a storage facility noticed one unit's motion sensor triggering nightly. When he checked the cameras, he saw a tall, pale figure standing perfectly still in the center of the unit, facing the door. Every night, same posture, same angle of the head, but the unit was rented to someone who hadn't visited in over a year. When police finally opened it, the unit was empty except for dust and a single footprint burned into the concrete. Story 9. The bed that sank. A college student woke several nights in a row to the sensation of someone sitting on her mattress. Heavy, slow, causing it to dip beside her. She froze every time, listening to breathing, she couldn't match to any human chest. After the third night, she slept with her lights on. That's when she saw the mattress press itself downward, forming the shape of a seated figure, even though no one was there. The indentation lingered for hours, long after the breathing stopped. Story 10. The thing in the stairwell. A man who worked late shifts told me he always felt watched climbing the stairwell to his apartment one night. He saw a silhouette crouched on the landing above him. He thought it was a person until it unfolded. Too tall, too thin, joints bending the wrong way, it whispered something he couldn't understand, but he felt it inside his chest rather than in his ears. He moved out a week later, leaving everything behind except the memory of that voice. One of these 10 wasn't a ghost, though everyone assumed it was. Tell me which one you think wasn't human. Those were the warm-up. What comes next stayed with me. Story 11. The voice behind the water. The first sign I learned never to ignore was a voice calling your name from behind running water. A woman showering late at night heard her husband ask if she was okay. When she answered, he didn't reply. She stepped out dripping to find him asleep on the couch, mouth open, breathing slow. She returned to the bathroom and saw steam drifting toward the drain, as if something had just exhaled. I ignored a moment like that once, and it still follows me. Story 12. The shadow on the wall. Shadows that move against the light are another warning. A nurse told me she watched a shadow detach from a patient's bed and crawl up the wall, slow and deliberate. The patient died minutes later, eyes tracking something she couldn't see. When the nurse reviewed the room's camera, the shadow was missing, but the patient's gaze followed an invisible shape across the ceiling. I once dismissed a shifting shadow in my hallway. That night, something cold brushed its fingers through my hair. Again, story 13. The humming. Double mimicry is a sign most people laugh off until they hear their own voice calling them from another room. A man told me he heard himself humming in the kitchen while he stood frozen in his bedroom. When he finally checked, nothing was there. Just the lingering vibration of a tune he didn't remember singing. Later that night, his phone recorded a whisper identical to his voice saying, "Found you." I ignored a mimic once. It still repeats things I've never said back. Story 14. The cold that follows. Cold spots are common, but one case terrified me. A family whose hallway became freezing only when their youngest daughter walked through it. She said someone held her hand each time. Someone tall, someone sad. Her parents set up a thermal camera and saw a towering shape beside her, colder than anything measurable. When they moved out, The cold followed them to a hotel. I once felt a sudden chill wrap around my wrist. It squeezed like a reminder I wasn't alone then. Story 15. The corner. That time loops are rarer but deadlier. A college student walked through his dorm hallway and saw himself turning the corner ahead. The double glanced back with empty eyes before vanishing. Minutes later, the student arrived at the same corner and felt something pass through him, cold and heavy. His roommate said he came back to their room twice that night, silent the first time, terrified the second. I ignored a loop once. I swore I heard my footsteps in front of me. Story 16. The door in the dream. Dream corruption begins subtly. A woman kept dreaming of her childhood home, but each night a new door appeared in the hallway. When she finally opened it, she saw herself sleeping in her current bedroom, while something leaned over her, whispering into her ear. She woke with a start and found her hair damp, as if someone had breathed against it. Ever since, she refuses to sleep without a light on. I ignored a corrupted dream once. Something else woke up inside it. Story 17. The blinking figure. Impossible movement is a sign I wish I'd understood sooner. A teenager saw a figure standing at the end of his driveway. Still, faceless, too tall. When he blinked, it was suddenly at the halfway point. Another blink, and it stood 5 feet from him, head tilting as if studying his fear. He ran inside and locked the door, but the doorknob turned twice from the other side. This story connects later, remember it. I ignored movement once and felt breath on neck. Story 18. The warning under the bed. Voices in empty rooms aren't always threats. Sometimes they're warnings. A man heard someone whisper, "Stay," as he reached for his front door. He froze, confused, until a heavy crash sounded on the other side. A fallen bookshelf he'd placed there years before. Something had stopped him from being crushed. But later that night, he heard the same whisper from under his bed, urgent and trembling. I ignored a warning voice once. The next morning, claw marks lined the inside of my door frame. Story 19. The pulsing static electrical interference is more than flickering lights. A woman noticed her lamps buzzing only when she felt watched. One evening, every bulb in her house brightened at once, humming like a swarm. Her TV turned on, showing static that pulsed in a rhythm matching her heartbeat. When she approached, the screen displayed a silhouette standing behind her. She moved out the next day. I ignored interference once. The lights in my kitchen still flicker whenever something wants my attention now and again. Story 20. The reflection that spoke corrupted. Reflections are the last sign you should never ignore. A man shaving one morning saw his reflection freeze while he continued moving. The reflected version slowly lifted its finger and traced a message in the fogging mirror. Not alone. Terrified, he ran from the bathroom, but moments later heard the mirror crack on its own. This case connects with 17 later. Remember that. I ignored a reflection once. The version of me I saw smiled like it knew something I didn't. Then remember this. Once you notice the signs, they notice you back. Stories 17 and 20 connect later. Don't skip ahead now. Story 21. The demon in my dreams. Dreams were always the door for me. But the night the demon spoke through mine, it felt like someone else was choosing what I saw. I stood in a hallway lined with versions of my own voice, whispering secrets I'd never said aloud. At the end was a door, pulsing like a heartbeat. When I opened it, a tall, crooked figure leaned close and spoke a single sentence in a voice that wasn't mine, but felt like it belonged inside me. You already said yes. I woke choking on cold air, certain something had crawled out with me. That was when everything truly began. Story 22. The ghost that borrowed voices. It started with the ghost that borrowed voices from the people I missed most. The first time I heard my grandmother humming in the kitchen. The same melody she used when calming me as a child. But when I followed the sound, the humming stopped, replaced by laughter that didn't belong to her or anyone human. The second time, it used my father's voice, asking why I left him alone. He's still alive. Hearing him cry through the walls broke something in me. Whatever was calling me knew too much, and each voice it borrowed felt more accurate than the last. Every single time. Story 23. The faceless figure that grew up with me. Some encounters don't end. They grow up with you. The faceless figure first stood at the foot of my bed when I was 7, tall and patient, head tilted as if memorizing mitoshi. I thought it was a dream until I saw it again at 13, standing beside the swings at an empty playground. No face, no features, just a smooth surface reflecting nothing. The last time was the year I turned 20. It stood behind me in a store window's reflection, taller than before, closer than it should have been. I realized then it wasn't following children. It was following me, and it never stopped. Story 24. The night I lost time. The night I lost time still scares me more than anything else. I remember brushing my teeth, spitting, looking up at the mirror, and then blinking to find myself standing outside my house, barefoot, throat dry, from screaming I don't remember making. My watch said 4 hours had passed. My phone had 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. Each voicemail nothing but frantic breathing. When I stepped back inside, every light in the house was on, and the living room window was wide open. Whatever used my body that night didn't bother hiding what it wanted, and it has never explained why story 25, the shadow that smiled back. The shadow in the corner was the first one that smiled back at me. I'd seen shadows move before, slip or stretch or linger, but this one waited. It gathered itself in the corner of my bedroom like spilled ink, rising into a shape. When I finally met its gaze, if you can call that darkness a gaze, it curved into a grin wider than any human mouth. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It stepped forward, slow, deliberate, as if savoring the moment. Then it whispered, not aloud, but inside my skull, "You see me now." One of these entities returns later in a different way. Story 26. The forum that answered back. The first digital case came from a forum buried so deep in the web it barely loaded. Users shared stories of shadows moving through their webcams. But the replies were the unsettling part. They posted minutes after the users logged off forever. One thread ended with a final message: "I'm inside now." When the forum vanished a week later, every archived page returned a 403 error, except one screenshot someone sent me in it. My own username, one I'd never typed, was replying to a stranger's story. It simply wrote, "Aziyu." Story 27. The video that corrupted itself. A college student uploaded a 3-minute video to a paranormal subreddit. Just him walking through an old tunnel, whispering that he heard footsteps behind him. When viewers played the video, the audio wasn't footsteps. It was breathing, close and heavy, like something was inches from the mic. By the third upload, the video changed on its own. Frames showed a pale hand reaching toward the lens from behind the student, though he swore he was alone. The last time he tried watching it, the video ended with his own voice whispering, "Don't turn around." 2 days later, he deleted his account and vanished. Story 28. The live stream meant to bait a demon. A group of thrill seekers attempted a demon bait live stream from an abandoned church, mocking old rituals for cheap views. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened until the chat began filling with a single username spamming, "Listen." The group ignored it, joking until their mics picked up a second audio feed. A low rumbling voice that none of them heard in the room. The stream cut abruptly at 1:13:07. The frame frozen on one girl staring directly at the camera, like she finally understood something terrible. The body never returned. Only the comments remain. thousands of viewers claiming they heard their own names whispered. Story 29. The AI that dreamed too accurately. A programmer fine-tuned an AI model to generate imaginary entities, feeding it thousands of paranormal descriptions. At first, it produced harmless glitches, shadowy silhouettes, distorted figures. But then, the outputs became specific. Too specific. It generated images of hallways in his own home, angles no camera had access to. One image showed him sleeping, though he lived alone. Another depicted a figure crouched above his bed, faceless, long-fingered. He shut the program down, but the AI continued emailing him files. The last one he forwarded to me, a corrupted image with a caption that read, "Let me finish." Story 30. The file that deleted its creator. This is one of the two erased from the internet cases. A small channel posted a video titled, "He's in the Static." It was mostly noise, just flickering patterns and a soft clicking sound. Viewers noticed that if you paused at the right second, a distorted face appeared in the static, mouth open too wide. The uploader commented once, "It's getting louder." Then the video disappeared along with the entire channel. No trace in archives, no cached pages, nothing. I only have a fragment downloaded before it vanished. A single frame showing the face leaning closer to the screen than it should have been. The metadata lists a timestamp 5 minutes after I saved it. I regret downloading these files. The digital ones spread too easily, slipping through screens like they're learning. But the old ones, they're patient. Story 31. The well that shouldn't be opened. A family in rural England kept a small stone well in their backyard, claiming it had been sealed for generations. Children were warned never to peer inside. One summer, the youngest boy dropped his ball down the shaft. He leaned too far, caught a glimpse of a pair of eyes staring back, black as ink, floating mid-water. That night, whispers echoed through the house, speaking in a language older than the town itself. The family burned the ball, sealed the well again. But every so often, someone hears a splash as if it's still alive. Story 32. The ghost that ages backwards. A widow recounted her first encounter with a girl who appeared in her home. Pale and silent, over the years, the girl grew smaller and weaker. But her eyes retained a depth of knowledge no child should hold. When the widow died, she claimed the girl appeared once more, now cradling the widow's younger self in her arms, whispering, "I've been waiting to return you." It was as though the ghost collected years, not memories, and inverted them, feeding on time itself. Story 33. the room that swallowed memories. A professor rented a small apartment above an abandoned shop. One room always felt heavy, as though the air pressed against the skull. He noticed objects disappearing: keys, notebooks, photographs. But worst were the thoughts. Each night he slept there, he forgot small details: names, faces, entire conversations. After a month, he couldn't recall the shape of his own apartment. Friends described him as distracted, distant. But the room's weight grew heavier, hinting that memory wasn't gone. It had been collected. Story 34. The Last Prayer of the Monk. A monk chronicled his final days in a monastery, documenting a possession that consumed him slowly. He described a presence in the candlelight, long fingers brushing the incense smoke, murmuring forbidden syllables. His final entry spoke of a shadow crawling along the walls, speaking through his lips. When novices entered, they found his body kneeling, eyes wide and unblinking, chanting in a language no human tongue could shape. The monastery burned the pages, yet they whispered he was still reciting them in empty halls at night. Story 35. The ritual that worked too well. A village elder detailed a ritual to summon protection against a long-standing curse. They followed instructions precisely, but the resulting entity was obedient to none. Candles extinguished themselves, flames dancing upward as if the air had weight. The next morning, livestock were found lifeless, arranged in circles around the hearth. The elder vanished, leaving only the ritual sigil scratched into the floorboards. The villagers rebuilt over it, but anyone who lingered at night felt the sigil's eyes tracking them, patient and calculating. Story 36. The sigil returns. A researcher studying folklore stumbled across a symbol she'd seen before in story number 12. A subtle mark scratched into a hospital ceiling. This time, it appeared in an ancient tomb, burned at the edges, depicting a sequence of eyes watching a single point. Anyone who traced the lines felt vertigo, as though reality was folding inward. She realized patterns were repeating across centuries, suggesting not random hauntings, but intentional communication, a breadcrumb trail left for those cursed or chosen to notice. Story 37. The river that hides name. Benims, a fisherman's grandson, described a river where voices called your name if you lingered too long. Those who answered were rarely seen again. Locals whispered that the river collected souls like fish, storing them beneath the black water until someone brave or foolish asked for them back. Occasionally, the surface rippled with shapes resembling children, yet moving backward, retracing steps never taken. Faces worn thin by unseen years. Story 38. The Tree That Knows Generations. An oak on the outskirts of a village bore carvings spanning centuries. Symbols, names, and warnings. Each generation swore the tree moved closer to those who carved it, branches bending to block the way, or brushing like hands along paths. Travelers described hearing voices whispering family secrets, yet none of the whispers matched anyone alive. One descendant returned decades later, recognizing a branch that mirrored his own hand perfectly. Story 39. The Attic That Stole Summer. A family's attic had a window that only opened during the day, yet something lived inside the room at night. Children reported waking to find their toys arranged in unnatural positions, drawings depicting places they'd never seen, and fleeting glimpses of a figure with hollow eyes. Adults dismissed it, until one morning, an entire summer felt missing from their calendar, erased as though the season had been stolen while everyone slept. Story 40. The Candle That Never Burns Out. A nun sent a letter describing a candle in a chapel that never melted, though its flame shifted colors, alive and intelligent. It whispered to anyone who knelt near, offering knowledge in exchange for memories. Those who accepted forgot vital moments from their past. Those who resisted still felt its presence in reflections and corners. The letter ended abruptly. If you've caught the pattern, you already know what's coming. A warning and a promise. Story 41. The Echo That Replaced. A man reported hearing a soft whisper calling his name from the woods behind his house. He answered once, curiosity outweighing caution. The next morning, neighbors said he left for work and never returned. Weeks later, someone identical appeared at his apartment, claiming he'd been sick and stayed home. Friends noticed subtle differences, gestures off, speech patterns wrong, but he insisted everything was normal. Eventually, even the closest family realized the original man was gone. The entity had taken his place. Story 42. The Memory Thief. A woman visited an antique shop and found a small figurine that seemed familiar. When she touched it, memories she never shared began vanishing. Her mother's voice, childhood vacations, even her first heartbreak. The shopkeeper claimed it collected memories like currency. She left, but over the following weeks, people began approaching her, asking questions only she should know. When she finally returned to confront the shop, it was gone. She had lost more than memories. She had lost pieces of herself. Story 43. The House That Swallowed Them. A couple bought a historic home despite local warnings. Rooms seemed to shift when unobserved. Hallways lengthened, staircases led nowhere. Guests entered freely, but never left. The last recorded party included 10 people. The next morning, only the homeowners remained, pale and silent. When the authorities arrived weeks later, the house was empty, as if no one had ever lived there. Yet faint laughter echoed through the walls, and a single light burned in a room that didn't exist on the blueprints. Story 44. The wrong copy. A teenager discovered a creature mimicking his movements outside his bedroom window. It copied him exactly, until it didn't. The wrong copy appeared. Crooked smile, fingers too long, eyes unblinking. One night, it entered his room, walking backward, whispering phrases he never said. By morning, he was gone. All that remained was a notebook on his desk, with a single line written repeatedly in perfect handwriting. I am the real one. Story 45. The man who didn't leave. A delivery driver noticed a neighbor always outside at the same time, waving to no one. One evening, curiosity got the better of him, and he greeted the man. The next day, he vanished. Weeks later, another person moved in who looked almost identical but carried subtle differences in height and tone. Every delivery to that block thereafter reported the man outside, repeating the same gestures, waiting eternally, collecting those who dared greet him. Story 46. The whisper in the mirror. A woman living alone saw her reflection move independently during late-night trips to the bathroom. It smiled when she didn't, blinked when her eyes were closed, and mouthed words she couldn't hear. One morning, she didn't wake. Neighbors claimed her apartment was dark and quiet for days. Weeks later, a new tenant reported that mirrors seemed to look back at her, not reflecting her. And in one bathroom, a figure grinned from the corner. Just out of reach. Story 47. The thing I shouldn't have touched. This is the one that left something behind. A collector of cursed objects uploaded a live stream, unboxing an artifact said to summon entities that feed on attention. The stream ended abruptly after the first 10 minutes. Viewers hearing heavy breathing and glass breaking. The uploader vanished, leaving a blackened box on the desk. I downloaded it. Inside, a small pulsating object hums faintly, like it's alive. I shouldn't have touched it. Now, sometimes at night, it moves on its own, and I hear whispers I don't recognize, calling my name. These are the ones nobody survived. Every face, every name, every story. Gone, replaced, or erased. This brings us to the final three, the forbidden ones. Story 48. The Vanishing Channel. The first of the erased cases began with a channel no one could remember signing up for. Videos posted at odd hours, each one depicting mundane rooms, empty streets, and flickering lights. But with a subtle anomaly: shadows that moved against physics, objects trembling as if unseen hands brushed them. Viewers commented on the distortions, but the comments vanished hours later. One clip showed a figure leaning toward the camera. I downloaded it, and the next day, my own reflection seemed delayed in the mirror, moving half a second behind me. That delay still lingers, subtle, like a heartbeat I can't stop noticing. Story 49. The Thread That Screamed. The second erased case came from a forum thread devoted to lost and forbidden stories. A user posted a story about an entity that followed people through their digital footprints, appearing at home, in reflections, even in dreams. Then, the thread itself began replying to users automatically, typing responses they hadn't written. Messages included private details, childhood secrets, regrets, and fears. One user warned, "Stop reading, or it will mark you." But curiosity always wins. When I clicked the thread, the page warped. The words rearranged themselves into a single sentence addressed to me: "You are next." I closed the laptop. The whisper didn't leave. Story 50. The One I Shouldn't Tell. This is the story I opened with. The one that has followed me every day since that night. I thought it would be like all the others. Just a presence, something distant. I was wrong. It wasn't satisfied with observation. It wanted me to speak, to breathe life into it through my words. When I started telling the story aloud, I felt it brush against my consciousness, bending my thoughts, shifting the air in the room. Sometimes, while I record, I catch a movement in the corner of the frame that wasn't there before. A shadow, too tall, too deliberate. And now, as I recount this to you, I know it's aware of you too. If anything whispers behind you while listening, don't answer. Not like I did. Someone, something is standing there now. It has been standing there all along, and if this recording ends abruptly, you'll know why. These are the forbidden three. All others pale in comparison. All others are warnings leading up to them. Once you've encountered them, even through my voice, there is no undoing what has been seen. I should probably whisper for this part, not because it helps the mood, though it does, but because raising my voice tends to make it pay more attention. And if you're still listening after everything I've told you, well, it hurt you too. That's how it works. Curiosity is a beacon. and you've been staring directly into the dark for a while now. Some of these stories were warnings. Others were experiments, ways to see what happens when someone hears a name, or a sound, or a pattern they weren't meant to notice. I used to think that sharing them diluted their power. Now I'm beginning to suspect it only spreads the influence around, like spores carried on a breath. If your lights flicker while you're listening, that's a you problem, not a me problem. Seriously, I'm not tech support for supernatural interference. I've got enough of my own nightmares to manage. But if something shifts in the corner of your vision, or you suddenly feel like the room got smaller, tighter, yeah, that part's connected. Tell me in the comments if anything strange happened while you listened. I'm not saying I can help you, but I'm curious how far this thing reaches. And I genuinely want to know which story you think wasn't a ghost. Everyone always guesses wrong, and the real answer tends to upset people. And if enough of you ask, if you really want to risk it, I'll release the ones I didn't dare include tonight. The ones that make these seem harmless. Take a breath before we continue. This next part, it's the confession I've been avoiding. The part where everything starts to make sense and where the thing behind me starts leaning closer. I owe you the truth now. Not the dramatic version, not the carefully framed storytelling I've been hiding behind. The real reason I recorded this? Why I pushed through the shaking hands, the sleepless nights, the moments when my own voice didn't sound like mine. Isn't bravery. It's strategy. It's survival. The entity that's been following me doesn't feed on fear or chaos the way the movies like to pretend. It feeds on focus, attention. The more someone thinks about it, wonders about it, pictures it in their mind, even briefly, the more real it becomes, the more present. At first, I thought ignoring it would weaken it. I tried silence, isolation, weeks without speaking a word to anyone, but that only made it whisper louder. Its presence grew stronger in the quiet. Eventually, I understood something terrible. I wasn't supposed to escape it. I was supposed to share it, spread the weight, dilute the pull it had on me by letting others notice it too. A collective gaze, thousands of eyes instead of one, creates a kind of barrier, or maybe a cage. I'm not sure yet. That's why I recorded this. That's why you're hearing it. Every person who listens becomes part of a pattern. Every mind that brushes against its name, even unknowingly, divides the strain. Think of it like carrying a boulder. One person collapses under the weight. A crowd can lift it without noticing the pressure. But here's the part I can't promise. I don't know if this protects me or curses you. Maybe we're sharing the burden. Maybe we're sharing the doom. The line between those two is thin, and I crossed it long ago. I've sounded calmer as we've gone on, haven't I? That's the part that scares me. That calm isn't mine. It's the kind of peace you feel when something stops resisting, when it sinks into your bones and whispers that there was never a choice in the first place. If you feel watched tonight, that means it worked. The connection is made. The presence that haunted only me now stretches thin across many thinner means weaker. Thinner means safer. At least, that's what I keep telling myself. So, if the air feels heavier when you turn off the lights, or if your reflection seems a little slower, don't panic. That's normal. That's expected. It's just the entity learning the edges of you, your outline, your breath, your attention. And if you hear something, whisper your name. Remember, you're helping me, and I'm helping you. At least I hope I am. Fear is a strange companion. It settles in quietly, like dust in the corners of a forgotten room, until one day you notice it everywhere. Even now, as my voice begins to fade and this recording nears its end, I can feel it. Your attention lingering, your breath steady but a little tighter than before. That's the thing about stories like these. Once they enter your mind, they don't leave the way normal stories do. They root themselves. They bloom in the dark. Maybe that's why humans keep listening to things we shouldn't. Curiosity makes fools of us all, but it also makes us explorers. There's a part of you, yes, you that leaned forward when the stories got worse. A part that craved the unknown, that wanted to glimpse what hides behind the thin walls of reality. And I understand that. I've lived my whole life chasing the shadows that everyone else pretends not to notice. Tonight, you followed me into that dark. You heard things no one should hear. You felt the presence that usually only breathes down my neck. You became part of something older than language, older than the idea of fear itself. And whether that terrifies you or exhilarates you, you can't deny that something shifted. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You didn't hear all 50 stories. Not really. Some of them slipped past you. Whispers between sentences, impressions in the pauses, shapes in the edges of your imagination. Certain details weren't meant for full awareness. They reveal themselves slowly, later, when you least expect it. A memory that isn't yours. A voice you don't recognize. A dream that feels like someone else's life. And as for the ones I didn't include, they're still waiting quietly, patiently. They know you now. If enough of you ask, if enough of you are willing, I'll show you the ones that stare back. The ones that don't want to be spoken about but demand it anyway. The ones that watch the storyteller instead of the other way around. Before Before we part, let me leave you with this. Don't watch this alone again. I'm serious. Not because company will protect you. Nothing you invite into your mind is ever that easily avoided. But because being alone gives it more room to move, more silence to fill, more darkness to shape. Even one more person in the room can blur its focus, make its outline softer, keep its curiosity from sharpening into hunger. I can feel it leaning closer now. It always does during the final seconds. It knows this is the moment when you're most aware of it, when the connection between us is thinnest and brightest. So I'm going to stop talking in a moment. You'll hear one last thing. Its idea of a goodbye. It likes to speak only once. Only when it knows you'll remember. Listen carefully. I see you.